Welcome back to another B.Hooked crochet video tutorial. I'm your host Brittany, and today I'm going to be discussing and demonstrating how to do the vintage ripple stitch. Now this is not a design that I created, and this stitch has actually been around for quite some time, and you can find the free pattern for this available on various different websites around the internet. But I found the pattern to be really difficult to follow, and overall it's a pretty easy stitch, but honestly it took me a couple of tries to get it right before I finally figured it out. So I wanted to create a video so that I can show beginners especially that they can do a stitch that is, or that looks as complicated as this one does. But if you were to pull the pattern from the internet, you would probably run the other way and say, wow, there's just no way that I can do that stitch, because as I said, I had a lot of difficulty with it. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and discuss what you'll need for this tutorial and we'll get started. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using a worsted weight yarn, and I've got just a little scrap piece here. This is Caron Simply Soft, and the color is Blue Mint, I believe. And I am going to be using a 5.5mm crochet hook. You can supplement your own yarn and whatever weight that you have available or that you choose to use. Just pick a hook size accordingly, and you can use the label on the back, or if you have a little bit more experience with experimenting with different hook sizes, then just go ahead and use your judgment on that. Let's go ahead and get started. To begin making the vintage ripple, we need to start off by creating a slip knot. And to do so, we just need to wrap our working yarn around our index finger of our non-dominant hand 2 times, and we want to pull this back strand and set it over the front strand, and then grab that front strand, pull it up and over. Now go ahead and insert your hook into that loop, and this pattern has a repeat of 9 stitches plus 1. And now what that means is we are going to chain 9 until the piece is as long as we need it, and then we're going to chain 1 extra. So for this tutorial, I'm going to just create a swatch, and so I am going to chain 27, and then I'm going to add 1. So I'm going to chain a total of 28. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And now when I count out my chains, I count in groups of what the multiple is. So I just counted out 9 there. I'm going to start over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And with that, I've got 2 repeats. I'm going to create 1 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And so there I have 3 repeats, and I want to go ahead and add 1 as the pattern indicates. Okay, for row 1 of the vintage fan ripple, since we single crocheted an extra 1, that's going to account for the height of our stitches that we're going to be working across. So we're going to be working in single crochet only across the first row. And so we're going to skip the first chain and we're going to single crochet into the second one. So the loop on your hook never counts as a chain. You can just count the V's from there. So this is the first chain, this is the second. We're going to single crochet, so we want to insert our hook into the chain, yarn over and pull up your loop, and then yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. And now typically when we chain 1, we actually count that in our overall stitch count. But the way this pattern has been written and is available online, they are not counting the chains as a stitch. So just keep that in mind as we go along. So what we need to do is single crochet a total of 4 times, and then we have to single crochet 3 times into the 5th chain. So we've just made 1 single crochet. We're going to go ahead and put a single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So there's 2, 3, and 4. And for the 5th chain, we're going to put 3 single crochets into the same chain. And now we are going to single crochet once into each of the next 8 chains. Okay, and in the 9th chain, we're going to put 3 single crochets into that same chain. And now we are going to single crochet once into each of the next 8 chains. And now we need to put 3 single crochets into the next chain. And now if you're working on a swatch like me and you've used the same stitch number, the same chains, then you should end up with just 4 chains left at the end of this row. Now if you are actually diving right into a project, then it's important for you to know that at the very beginning and at the very end you should just have 4 single crochets before you have your group. And I'm going to explain why in just a moment. So what we're looking at here doesn't look like much, but after we complete the next row, it'll start to make a little more sense. But I want to explain to you exactly what you're seeing here. Each of these 3 bumps is probably obviously the points in the pattern. And so I know one thing I was thinking when I was working it was, well, where's the bottom of the ripple? You know, typically when you work any kind of ripple stitch, you know, the pattern goes up and then it comes back down to a point and then it goes back up. So I was really kind of confused by this. I hadn't really done anything like it before. So what we're going to do in row 2 is actually create that bottom portion of the ripple. So it's going to come together just like this. And so it'll probably make a little bit more sense to you. Let's go ahead and continue to row 2. To continue row 2, we need to chain 1, and remember, we're not counting this as a stitch. And from here, the rest of the pattern is going to be worked into the back loops only. So if you take a look at the top portion of your little swatch that we've got going here, you can see that, there is a little V. And so if this direction is facing towards you, we would consider this loop the front loop. And so the loop that's furthest away from you is considered the back loop. And so we're going to be working in that only. So what we're going to do is just put our crochet hook under that single loop by itself. Okay, so anytime you hear work in the back loops only, or if you see that in a pattern, that's what it means. And this is going to create somewhat of a ridge. Since you're going to be working in these loops only, these loops are going to be exposed, and so it's going to create like a cool texture to this pattern. Okay, and since we are working on a ripple, we know that this little portion right here is coming down. So we know that this is, we'll say, half of a repeat. And so for the rest of the ripples, we're going to be skipping 2 stitches in order to make the bottom point of the ripple. And since this is technically half of one, we're going to be skipping the first stitch. Okay, and so we are going to work a single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So go ahead and skip that first stitch and work into the back loop only of the next one and make a single crochet. That's 1. Working into the next one is 2, 3, and 4. And a visual cue that you can use is you want to end up on the point. You want the point to be your next stitch. So because we're going to increase again, we're going to be adding 3 stitches to this stitch itself, and we want that to be exactly centered over the row below. So go ahead and do that next. Do 3 single crochets into the back loop of that next stitch, which just so happens to be the top stitch on our point. So I've got 2, and there's 3. Okay, and now we want to single crochet once into each of the next 4 stitches, working in the back loops only. And now, as I said, we're coming down to the bottom portion, or what's going to be the bottom portion of our ripple. And in order to make the shape, to kind of curve this up, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So we're going to skip here, and we're going to put a single crochet into the 3rd one. And we're also going to put 1 single crochet into each of the next 3. And now, just like before, we should end up with the middle stitch of that 3 as our next one, and we want to go ahead and single crochet 3 times into that same stitch. Okay, and so if you set it down for a second, you can kind of see that it's taking shape a little bit more. So it's a little bit more of a point now, rather than just a straight line with a few little bumps in between. And that's your repeat. Like I said, no matter what size you're working on, we're always going to be working in basically groups of 4. We're going to single crochet 4 up the ridge, and then we're going to put 3 single crochet into the top stitch then we're going to put 4 going down. We're going to skip 2 and repeat that whole process. Let me just double count here. So I've got 4, and so now next I'm going to skip this stitch and this stitch, and I'm going to go into this one here and single crochet, and I'm going to do that 4 times. 2, 3, and 4. Now 3 single crochet in this top stitch here, and we should have 5 single crochets left. Remember, because we're skipping a stitch at the very end. So don't be alarmed if you're like, oh no, I've got 5 stitches left, I've done something wrong. You actually are doing it correctly. Okay, that completes row 2 for our little sample here. Okay, moving on to row 3. It's actually worked exactly the same as row 2. So to start off, we want to chain 1 and turn our work. We're going to skip the first stitch, and we're going to single crochet into the back loop of the next stitch, and we're going to do that in each of the next 4 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just like before, we want to make sure we're ending up on this middle single crochet there that's at the top of the point, and we want to put 3 single crochet into that same stitch, and now we want to work 4 single crochet all the way down. Okay, and just like before, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So we're skipping these 2, and we're going to single crochet into the next. And we're going to put 3 single crochet into the next one, the top of the point. Okay, now that's our repeat. So go ahead and finish up. You'll be putting 1 single crochet into each of the next 4. You're going to skip 2, single crochet into the third, and then you'll put 3 single crochets in the point. So go ahead and finish that, and we'll meet back up at the end of round 3. Okay, now that we've finished row 3, we're going to go ahead and start on row 4, which is the fan section of the stitch. And this is typically after this next row where people will change color, so we'll go over that too as well. So to start off on row 4, we're not going to chain anything, just go ahead and turn your work, and we're going to slip stitch into each of the next 3 stitches. And we are actually going to count this first one. We've been skipping that previously, but we're going to go ahead and slip stitch here. So insert your hook into the back loop, yarn over, and pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the loop that was on your hook. And do that 2 more times. And what we are doing is just positioning ourselves into the stitch that we need to be in to start the fan. Okay, now for this portion we're going to be using the triple treble, and that stitch is 6 chains high. So yes, this, if you're making an afghan out of this, it is going to grow incredibly fast. I would say one of these color repeats is about 2.5 inches or so long, so that's always a great thing. So go ahead and chain 6, Okay, and to work the triple treble, you need to yarn over 4 times. Okay, and these kind of take a little bit of practice. They're probably going to look a little bit crazy at first, or maybe a little bit uneven, and that's okay. I would just go ahead and take some time to practice if they turn out looking not so great. So go ahead and yarn over 4 times, and then insert your hook into the next chain. So this, like I said, this is going to count as 1 stitch, and insert your hook into the next stitch, the back loop only, yarn over and pull up a loop. And now we're just going to work it on through. We're going to yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. You end up doing that 5 times. So I found myself counting in my head, you know, after I would yarn over, pull through 2, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's how I know I'm getting the proper size. And so we need to put 1 more triple treble into the next stitch. So this is going to work a lot like the single crocheted portion, but it's going to be slightly different. It's 1 stitch shorter. So we're going to have a total of 9 of these. We're going to have 3 going up, and then we're going to put 3 into the top point, and we're going to put 3 going back down. So go ahead and triple treble into the next stitch. And I find that I have to kind of steady this with my hand. As you can see, I'm kind of covering up my work from the camera's view, but that's how I make mine even. I kind of work my tension by holding on to it as I go. So now we've got our 3 going up the fan. Now we need to put 3 into the top point. So that single crochet right there at the top. Put 3 into that same stitch. And as you can see, I didn't yarn over enough. There we go. This stitch is rather new to me too. I've never really had a need to do this stitch, so I catch myself not yarning over enough, which is part of why I count as I go through. Okay, putting another triple treble into the same stitch. And 1 more into the same stitch. Okay, and now we're going to start working down the ripple. So we're going to put 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. And once again, we're working in the back loops only. Okay, there's 1. I've got 2 more to go. So go into the next one. One of these things that you want to keep in mind is that this is a yarn hog of a project. So if you do plan on making like a scrap afghan or something along those lines, then just keep in mind that you will need a pretty decent amount for each of your color repeats. And so now I'm putting my 3rd one in. Okay, and now from here we need to skip 4 stitches. So turn your work over. We want to skip 1, 2, 3, 4, and we want to start working in the 5th. So I'm going to hold on to this with my fingers and my thumb so I know which one it is. And you want to be careful to make sure you are counting. Now, if you've been working with this for a long time, you'll probably get to the point where you can just visualize it. But especially when you're this early in the project, you want to make sure that you are counting everything out so you don't get caught up with a mistake in the end. And so now we're just working back up the other side. And so we skipped those 4 stitches to just maintain the shape of the ripple. Okay, going into the next one. And kind of a checkpoint, just like in the previous rounds, we want to make sure we're at the top of the point now, and we are going to make 3 triple trebles into the stitch, just like we did on the previous pattern repeat. Okay, so that's our pattern repeat. We've got one more section, or I do, if you're following along with the same size, we've just got one more portion left. So go ahead and finish triple trebling 3 times, skip 4 stitches, and work your way back over the other ripple, and we'll meet back up at the end of this round, and we'll talk about changing colors. Okay, now at the end of row 4, we're going to go ahead and bind off and change colors. So we just want to cut ourselves probably about 4 to 5 inches or so of slack, and then I just pull that tail through the loop on my hook, and now we're ready to start off with the other color. Now I'm going to add white to mine next, and so what we need to do is just create a slip knot again, and again leave yourself a few inches of slack. You'll be weaving those in at the end of your project. And we want to turn our work to the wrong side, and that's the opposite side that we were just working on. And now I would like for you to insert your hook into the very last stitch here, or the very first stitch in this case, and fasten on your yarn by pulling through that loop and chaining 1. And that is going to secure it in place. And now basically we're just repeating row 1. So on row 1, if you remember, we put 4 single crochets, and then we put 3 single crochets into the next, and then we did 8 single crochets and then 3 in the next. So we're going to do that pattern sequence again. And since we're not counting the chaining as a stitch, I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into the same stitch that I just joined my yarn, and that's going to count as 1. And then we're going to do that into the next 4. And now if you look at your previous row, the next stitch should be the very center top point. We want to put 3 single crochets into that point. And then we need to put 4 single crochets going down, and then we'll put another 4, so we want a total of 8 single crochets. And now we just want to double check again and make sure our next stitch is at the top of the point, and single crochet 3 more times into that same stitch. Once again, we're still working in back loops only. And now just repeat that sequence again. We want to put 1 single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. Double check to make sure the next one is a point, and it is. And we want to put 3 single crochets into that same stitch. Okay, and now we should be left off with 4 stitches left. Now one thing to keep in mind, the 4th stitch here is actually our chaining of 6 from before. So go ahead and single crochet yourself into these next 3. And now what you want to do is just single crochet into the back loop of the very last chain. See, my last chain is right here. I'm just going to insert my hook into just the back loop only and single crochet. And that's the end of row 5 here in this case. It's the first row of our color repeat. Now the next row is the same as row 2. So we're just basically repeating the same 4 rows from basically from here on out to the end of the project. So go ahead and chain 1 and turn your work. And I want you to skip the first stitch. This is really important. I forgot to do this a few times and it will just completely mess up your pattern. So don't forget to skip that first stitch, single crochet into the next, and in each of the next 3 stitches. And we want to put 3 single crochets into the next stitch. And we want to put 4 single crochets down our ripple. And now we're going to skip 2 stitches. So we're going to skip 1 and 2, and we're going to single crochet into the next. That's creating our bottom point, and continue single crocheting up until you reach the top point. And once you get there, we're going to add 3 single crochets. And so just go ahead and repeat that all the way across. Okay, we're going to do 4 single crochet, and then going down we're going to skip 2, 4 back up, single crochet 3 into this top point, and then single crochet 4 back down. So go ahead and finish up this row and we'll meet back up. Okay, I've made it across to the end of this row, and now we're going to start on row 3. Go ahead and chain 1 and turn your work. Skip the first stitch, single crochet into the next and into each of the next 3. And just repeat this row exactly the same as the previous row. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and work my way across, and we'll come back when you're at the end of this round or this row. Okay, I've made it to the end of row 3 for this color repeat, and remember from here we're just going to turn our work, and we're not going to chain anything. We're going to slip stitch 3 times into over the first 3 stitches. So including this first one, we're going to slip stitch there and in each of the next 2. And now we need to chain 6, and that counts as our first stitch. Now yarn over 4 times, And we're going to triple treble into the next stitch. And we're going to do that again for the next stitch. And we're going to put 3 triple trebles into the next stitch. And now once again we should be working on the top point. So this row is exactly the same as row 4 from the previous color. So go ahead and finish up this row, and I'll show you what I would do if I were going to bind off or finish the edge if you were creating a blanket out of this pattern. Okay, I've finished my second color repeat, and let's just say for a second that this is a completed project or a full blanket and it's completely done. But the one thing we don't like is that it doesn't really look done on this side. And what I have come up with as a solution is to add on a second row like this. And I would probably have to experiment with it. I would say you would probably want to keep it in the same color. But that way, your starting end, which is going to be over here, is going to have that border, and your finishing end is going to have the same border as well in the same color. So let's go ahead and start that. Now basically all it is just the repeat of rows 1, 2, and 3, and then from there you would bind off, but we'll run through it real quick. Starting off the first row, what we were doing before was just chaining 1, and we'll flip our work, and we are going to put 1 single crochet into each of the first 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. We want to make sure we're ending up in the middle stitch here, but we want to put 3 single crochets into the same stitch. And now we want to put 1 single crochet into each of the next 4. But this is our first row, so we need to continue on putting 4 more single crochets. So we'll have a total of 8. Now in this 9th stitch, or the point of the next ripple, we'll put 3 single crochets. Let's see. I've got 3 there. Okay, so now we'll put 1 single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. Now at the top of the last point, we're going to put 3 single crochets. And we'll put a single crochet into each of the last 4 stitches. Once again, just like before, the last stitch is a chain. So we just want to turn the chain so that it's facing this way, so it looks like a braid. Insert your hook into the top chain, but in that back loop only, and single crochet. Okay, and now if you flip your work, you can see it looks a little more complete, and if you're content with the way this looks, then you can go ahead and bind off and be finished. And actually I think it may look a little bit better than adding a full 3-row repeat here, because you're not adding, you know, a huge section here. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to keep going because I'm curious to see how it looks with all 3 at the end. So from here, starting row 2 of our pattern repeat, we're just going to chain 1. We're going to skip our first stitch and single crochet into each of the next 4. And put 3 single crochets into the next, or the point. And now 4 single crochets going down the ripple. And we're going to skip 2 stitches, so 1 and 2. We're going to single crochet into the 3rd. And all the way up the next ripple, and we're going to single crochet 3 into the point. Single crochet 4 back down. Skip 2, go into the 3rd, and work your way back up the next ripple. Put 3 into the top. And work your way back down. Okay, now that would be the end of our second color repeat. So once again, if you like the way it looks like this, you can bind off and be finished. I'm going to go one more row, one more repeat, and see how it looks from there. Okay, so I'm starting the 3rd row to make this a repeat, and now this is exactly the same as the row that we just did and all of the 3rd rows that we've done on the previous portions. We're going to skip the first, go into the next, and just work your way across. So if you're following along with me, go ahead and finish crocheting this row exactly like we just did the last row, and we'll bind off. Okay, I've reached the end of that row, and now I'm going to go ahead and bind off and take a look and see how this looks as a finishing edge for a blanket or for whatever project you're working on. Okay, so that's an option too. If you're not loving the way the ripple looks just by itself, then it's always good to go ahead and add a couple of rows, whether you do the full repeat here or just a couple of rows to finish off the edge. I think it looks nice either way. It actually does look much more finished and professional this way. So that concludes this video tutorial on the demonstration of the vintage fan ripple, and I have actually really fallen in love with this stitch. I plan on crocheting a blanket out of it, and I'm not typically one to take on huge projects like that, but I love the stitch so much, and I feel like it's going to grow fast enough that I think I can actually finish something. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm really excited to hear how you feel about it. I want to see your projects. There's so many different things that you can do with this stitch. It's very cool, it's very beginner friendly, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I do. So on behalf of B.Hooked Crochet, I'm your host Brittany, and we'll see you next time.